Namaste children. This is Jyoti Devgan from the Department of Social Science, and today I am going to teach you a new chapter, Devotional Paths to the Divine. Devotional Paths to the Divine, meaning to the Lord. You may have seen people perform many rituals of worships, or maybe singing bhajans, kirtans, or kavalis, or even repeating the name of God in silence. And you must have noticed some of them crying in praise of God. Such intense devotion or love of God is the legacy of various kinds of bhakti and Sufi movements that have evolved since the 8th century. Now, first of all, talking about the subtopics I'm going to take in this video. First of all, the idea of a supreme God. Then a new kind of a bhakti in southern India. We are also going to talk about Nayanars and Alvars. Philosophy and bhakti. We will also talk about Basavanna's Veera Shaivism. Veera Shaivism. The saints of Maharashtra will also be talked about in this video. Now, first of all, talking about the idea of a supreme God. Before large kingdoms emerged, different groups of people worshipped their own gods and goddesses. As people were brought together through the growth of towns, trades, and empires, new ideas began to develop. The idea that all human beings are not equal, it only gained ground during this period. It was during this period that this segregation of casteism, you may say, evolved. The idea of a supreme God who could deliver humans from bondage through devotion or bhakti, that also emerged, means that also came into being. The gods and goddesses worshipped in different areas came to be identified with Shiva, Lord Vishnu, or Durga. Now, a new kind of bhakti in southern India in the form of Nayanars and Alvars. The 7th to 9th centuries, they saw the emergence meaning upcoming, the beginning of a new religious movement, and which was led by Nayanars. Now, who were Nayanars? They were basically saints devoted to Lord Shiva. And Alvars, who were the saints who were devoted to Lord Vishnu. Now, mind you, all these belonged to the lowest caste. They were sharply critical of the Buddhists and Jains. And they preached love, or rather ardent love of Shiva or Vishnu as the path of salvation. Salvation means mukti. Salvation means free from rebirth, from the cycle of birth. The Nayanars and Alvars, they went from place to place, composing or making two good poems of praise of the deities enshrined in the village they visited and set them to music. Now, you must have heard many bhajans. This was the beginning. Then, during this time, it was the beginning of this kind of a system. They started writing poems and then they used to give some kind of music in them. The Chola and the Pandya kings built huge temples around many of the shrines. Now, as I told you, by and by, temples also evolved. Now, coming over to philosophy and bhakti. Basically, Shankara, one of the most influential philosophers of India, was born in Kerala in the 8th century. He was an advocate of Advaita. Advocate of Advaita means he used to explain the doctrine of oneness of the individual soul and the supreme God, which is actually the ultimate reality. He taught that Brahman, the only, or rather, he always taught that Brahmins were the ultimate reality and they were formless and without any attributes. He considered the world around us to be an illusion, what at present we call Moh Maya ka Jal. It was Maya, an illusion. All this worldly life is nothing but illusion. It is Maya. And he preached the renunciation of the world. Renouncing the world means leaving the world, or rather leaving these relations, the father, son, husband, wife. A time comes when one has to be detached from the family. And he also forced upon adoption of the path of knowledge to understand the true nature of Brahman and attain salvation. Salvation meaning mukti. Now Ramanuja, another saint, he was born in Tamil Nadu in the 11th century. He was also deeply influenced by the Alvars. According to him, the best way of attaining salvation was through intense devotion to Lord Vishnu. Vishnu, in his grace, helps the devotee to attain bliss of union with him. Now, if he believed, Ramanuja, he believed that if we pray to Lord Vishnu, he will ultimately bring humans in his shelter and will be called as one. He propounded the doctrine of Vishavta Advaita or qualified oneness, in that the soul, even when united with the Supreme God, it remained distinct. When the soul was united with God, but still it remained aloof. Now, Ramanuja's doctrine greatly inspired the new strand of bhakti, the new kind of bhakti which developed in North India side by side. Now, switching over to Basavana's Veera Shaivism. We had noted earlier the connection between the Tamil Bhakti movement and the temple worship. Now, this in turn led to a reaction that is best shown in Veera Shaiv movement, started by Basavana and Akamaha Devi. This movement began in Karnataka in the mid 12th century. This in turn led to a reaction that is best shown in the Veera Shaiv movement, started by Basavana and his companions like Allamma Prabhu and Aka Mahadevi. This movement began in Karnataka in the mid 12th century. The Veera Shaivs, they argued strongly for the equality of human beings and against Brahmanical ideas. Earlier, as I told you, there were saints who preached that only Brahmins had the right to be supreme God or had the right to be one with God. But now there were Veera Shaivs who started talking about equality of men and women, equality of caste. They were also against all forms of rituals and idol worships. Now, talking about the saints of Maharashtra. From the 13th to the 17th centuries, Maharashtra saw a number of saint poets whose songs in simple Marathi language continued to inspire and allure the people of Maharashtra. The most important among them were Gyaneshwar, Namdev, Eknath, and Tukaram, as well as women like Shakhubai and the family of Chokhamela, who belonged to the untouchable or the Mahar caste. Now, mind you, by this time, they all started talking about caste system and they were almost against the caste system. So now the saints who started developing their own small groups were all from the untouchable caste. This regional tradition of bhakti focused on Vitthal. Now Vitthal is another form of Lord Vishnu, as well as on the notion of a personal God residing in the hearts of people. You must have heard till now there are some people who believe that God resides inside you. Now imagine during the 17th and 18th century also the notion was the same. These saint poets, they rejected all forms of rituals. No kind of puja or idol worship was there. Outward display of piety, showing that if you are going to burn the agarbattis or the jot, then only are you doing some puja. No, they were against idol worship. In fact, they even rejected the idea of renunciation, which had been started earlier. Renunciation, I told you, leaving your family and going somewhere in the abode of Himalayas. They always forced and preferred to live with their families, earning their livelihood like any other person. Now, the saints of this time, they always believed that being in the family or with the family was not a crime. It is not necessary that a saint has to leave the family and go away and live. A new humanist idea emerged as they insisted that bhakti lays in sharing others' pains. If you do the proper work, if you do karma, that was more important. If you help someone, that is most important. As the famous Gujarati saint Narsim Mehta, he said, they are Vaishnavas who understand the path of others. असली भक्त वो हैं जो दूसरों की religion की कद्र करते हैं. Those who understand others. That's all in this video.